Creed 3 is directed by Michael B. Jordan and stars Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors, Tessa Thompson, and among others. And this is the ninth film in the overall Rocky franchise and the third film in, so far, the Creed trilogy. And in this film, it deals with Adonis Creed, who's now retired, and he's having to live his life after defeating Ivan Drago's son, Victor Drago, in the last Creed. And one day, he ends up coming across an old childhood friend of his that he grew up with, that's played by Jonathan Majors, named Damien. And basically, it gets into a rivalry after a while, where essentially Jonathan Majors' character wants to try to get the title shot and become the world heavyweight champion, and he wants to go for pro and tries to get Creed to try to get him to on that level and stuff. But well, if you've seen from the trailers, it gets into some things where they start to really reconcile each other after they haven't seen each other in a long time, and then it starts to get into a point where Damien wants to basically go for the title. And now, here's a little backstory. Now, if you've been following my channel, I did a whole retrospective of the Rocky series, and I also reviewed the second Creed film a few years ago. And I've been an avid fan of the Rocky films for a very long time. I think they still hold up as some of my favorite films, especially the first two, and even to an extent with the fourth film. Like, every film in the series always has its merits to it. Maybe not Rocky 5, but a lot of the other ones do, and I think that they really hold as not only great boxing films, but also great just movies in general, that where the stories come, where a lot of the stronger ones like the first two have the characters come first and the boxing second. And then over the years, after they started doing more of them, and eventually after they got to the sixth film with Rocky Balboa, it seemed like they were trying to go into a different direction, where when Creed 1 came out, they wanted to do it more focus on spin-offs, so to speak, of the actual Rocky franchise. And seeing how Sylvester Stallone has been avid, doing this franchise for so long, when he came back with the first Creed, the first two Creed movies, it really made me wonder where it was going to go at this point with the third film, because even though I liked the first Creed, I still think that it wasn't really as great as the other Rocky films, but I thought it was still, a good solid return to form and being able to continue the legacy of the franchise and stuff. And then with Creed 2, knowing that we were basically getting the Dragos back and things like that, and making it more of a sequel to Rocky 4, it really expanded a whole lot of stuff that I really enjoyed, and it really felt like it came full circle with not only with Creed's story arc, but also with Rocky's as well in that film, and it really made me feel like, where else can they go at this point? And behind the scenes, there was some stuff going on to where essentially Stallone had a dispute happening with the rights to the Rocky character and stuff like that, and so that's why he wasn't in the third film. And so that really, and even before all that even happened, it really kind of made me even wonder, like, why even do a third Rocky film, or sorry, a third Creed movie? Because it really seemed like Creed 2 kind of wrapped everything up, and I didn't really see where else they could really go with this franchise. And so with the third Creed movie coming out, it was decided that since the Rocky character could no longer appear in the film, Michael B. Jordan essentially came in to direct the film as his first time directing, and they decided that basically the writers decided, everyone involved decided basically to continue a story where Adonis is essentially having to work on his own merits without Rocky. And I think there is an idea on paper where I think that could work, but I'm 50-50 on it, because there's certain aspects to where I think that, having to do it and continue with it could work only if you really have like a really great story involved with it. And so my expectations going into this was kind of low, but upon seeing the film, I can say that this was a good film. It gave me the same reaction kind of like I did with the first Creed, where it is very solid and it is definitely a good movie, but I think that there are certain aspects I think could have worked a whole lot better in quite a lot of extent had they would have gone a certain direction, and certain areas where you could have had Rocky involved with this in some capacity. But to get my pros out of the way, I will say that Michael B. Jordan is also great as usual as Adonis. He really shines in a lot of the scenes where he's fighting as usual in the boxing parts, and also his emotional scenes where he has, especially where him and Jonathan Majors are having to try to basically be like really longtime friends and stuff. I really bought it, and I thought their chemistry was not only very fantastic as it goes along, but also the rivalry as it builds up, I thought was not only emotional at times, but you could really feel the presence involved, where Jonathan Majors really steals a lot of the scenes in this, much like he did in Ant-Man, where he's not only very intimidating at points, but he's also a lot more sympathetic than what going into it that I thought. And so when you find out more of his backstory and stuff going on with that, you can really see a lot of where he comes from and all the years involved with where he had to rise up compared to what Adonis had to grow up with. And stuff like that. And so I won't go into detail, but it is a good backstory that they reveal with it. But I am kind of also 50-50 on certain aspects to his character that I'll get into more of my cons with. But I still thought Majors was really great in this, as usual. And he's not quite as, like, on the... Like, I would say that he's basically a tie with Victor Creed... With Victor Drago in the last film, at least as far as, like, the most, the stakes as really as high as that. But he's definitely on the same level as, as definitely on that level with it. So I kind of put him as a tie with that. And then the other performances are great too. Tessa Thompson is great as usual. And then you also have, I forgot the actress that played Creed's mom, but she was great in this as well. And she definitely carries out a lot of the emotional stuff throughout the movie. I thought was great. And then when it gets as far as the filmmaking aspects, I got to give it a lot of praise with not only with the way the fights are choreographed this time, with how they resemble a lot of how you see in boxing matches and stuff. Especially there's one part where when we get to the final fight and everything, it shows a lot of the it shows it to where Creed and Damien are in the same ring, but it's just them. That you just see their characters, you don't see anything in the background. It's almost kind of like an artsy, kind of dreamlike feel to it that I thought really worked and was definitely great filmmaking in that regard. And on top of the fights, I thought the fights this time were even more brutal than I thought, because you're seeing a lot of blood this time, where both characters, especially Creed, he's having to spew a lot of blood and everything, and they just go for the extreme in this. And I thought it was really, really gritty. It was almost like I was watching Southpaw again, that movie with Jake Gyllenhaal from some years ago. But on a good way. And then a lot of the other stuff too, where they're having to really build upon the stuff involved with Creed and his daughter. I thought was really well done, and I thought it was really interesting how they were trying to build where he's trying to basically be a good role model to her and stuff. Because there is a subplot involved where she gets in trouble at school because she is getting picked on by somebody, and the way they handle it, I think in this one, I think was the better version than what they did with Rocky V. The way they handled it in certain aspects. Because in that movie too, it also had it to where Rocky's son was getting into some stuff going on at school and everything, where he's getting picked on. And the way that they handle it better in the writing was, I thought, better done in this movie. So I give a lot of kudos to that. And then other than that though, it was great hearing the theme again from some of the Rocky films. I thought was great as well. And then there's really not much I can really go into detail, because to get into some of my cons, I will say that there's certain things that kind of hold the movie back. I did feel like the way that the story builds upon with Creed and Damien's characters, it seems like they could have added a whole lot more backstory involved, because there's certain instances where it seemed like there was a huge gap between the time that, because it flashes back in the beginning, and then you do see flashbacks throughout the film that kind of add on to it from the opening scene. But I think that they could have added more on top of it to kind of expand more of the stuff that was really involved with the rivalry that builds with Creed and Damien as the movie went along. Because it seems like there was certain things that they could have maybe spent more time with, but I think that also that's kind of adjacent to the problem I also have, where it seems like the pacing does feel a lot more slower this time, because there are certain scenes that kind of drag out a little bit. Not that some of the scenes are necessary because they do make an emotional point, but there are other scenes where there's some family drama that kind of gets a little too melodramatic at points, and it kind of drags the movie out. But those are just some of my little minor issues, because there are some really emotional scenes at work, but there are a couple times where it was just they could really kind of, trim this down just a little bit to kind of make the pacing go by quicker, and things like that. And one of my other biggest things that I think was a really big missed opportunity was, even though Rocky is not in the film, it still felt like his presence was a lot more needed this time, because it seems like there are certain scenes that he could have been added into that I think would have made sense to be in the context of the film, especially toward the end. And so that's one of the things I think really kind of held the movie back a lot, because even though it's good to see that Adonis is finally not trying to be in the shadow of Rocky anymore, you could still tell that there are still aspects to his. There are still certain scenes as you're watching, you're kind of thinking like, okay, there. I mean, Rocky is referenced. Don't get me wrong, but it still feels like his presence still should have been there as the movie went along with it. And so that is one of my only really things that really kind of, it was such a missed opportunity that they could have had. And so I don't know at this point if they're even going to have Rocky come back in the future films, but if Stallone ever gets the chance to come back again, it would be nice. Or if they do have him come back and try to give him a good send off, in a meaningful way, I could buy that. But it really depends on the writing and how they take the direction in the franchise. But other than that, though, I still had a really good time with this film, and while it's not as great as some of the other Rocky films, I thought it was still, a good step in the right direction with what they're doing with this franchise. And so with that, I'm going to give the movie a compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. And so for those of you who have also seen Creed 3 and also the other films of the Rocky franchise, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.